Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name's Stephanie Rublitz, and this week we are refashioning a men's dress shirt into a vintage style Western shirt. So, Western wear. Not my typical look. I spent my teen years in a town called Merritt, British Columbia, and I think there was a rodeo there every year. There was rodeo grounds. I never went. And while I was growing up, my dad lived in Medicine Hat, and Medicine Hat had a stampede and a rodeo and all that stuff. I went to the fairway and rode the rides. That was fun. Now I live in Calgary, Alberta, the home of the world's greatest outdoor show and exhibition. Did I still go to the rodeo? No. I've never been, ever. I've lived in all the places where rodeo is like supposed to be a thing, and I've never gone. I've never seen a barrel race, I've never seen a chuck wagon race, I've never seen like bronco riding, bull riding, none of it. None of it. I've seen it in movies, but I've never seen it in real life. What Stampede is for me is fairway rides, corn dogs, and mini donuts. And the bonus parade. Yeah, I said the bonus parade because the Calgary parade is like 18 hours long and you have to line up the day before to get a spot. So why do I want a Western shirt? I don't know, there's still like barbecues and pancake breakfasts. Oh my god, yeah, I forgot about the pancake breakfasts. Anyway, these little like festive things that happen around the city that there's been times I'm like, ah man, I wish I had a Western shirt. And you can't find one in a secondhand shop around here because the second one hits a rack, there's like a lineup of 10 people waiting to grab it. Oh, I need this for Stampede. So I was like, oh, well, you know, maybe this will be the year that I make myself one, because also we are having our 3-year-old's birthday party at the end of this week. And it is a spirit riding free. It's a Western cartoon with girls and horses and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, well, I'll get it done. Then I'll have the shirt for the party. I'll have it for Stampede if we do any stampeding, and it'll be fun. So I found a pattern for a vintage style shirt like I wanted. And it's a beautiful pattern, and I am not above paying for a good pattern, especially if it's something that like I know I'm gonna make more than once. But this pattern was almost 30 bucks. This is a shirt I'm probably gonna wear twice a year. So I decided to do a men's shirt refashion, and it was a really fun project. It was challenging, but it was fun. So in the end, the entire project cost me about 12 bucks. I did the prep for this shirt in last week's video, so if you haven't seen that, I will link it up here. But for now, we're gonna take all the pieces that we prepped last week and we are gonna put them together and make the shirt, and we're gonna have fun. All right, so here's the shirt before. It's quite big on me, and unfortunately, I didn't have anybody around when I started to help me do the pinning and darting and stuff like that because my mannequin is not my size. So I had to kind of like do the shoulders first in the shirt and then do my fitting later, and I just sort of did a quick fix fitting. I'm not really going to go into that too much just because this refashion was an absolute beast and I want to focus on all the Western detailing. So I took my stitch ripper and I removed the sleeves and the collar. I wasn't sure at this point if I was going to do the cuffs, but later on I did end up going and taking the cuffs off as well. Next, I'm applying the piping to the lines that I drew underneath my embroidered pieces last week. All right, now she's all pinned. And you can see that I've cut a little release sort of where that corner is just to help the piping take that corner a bit better. Once it's stitched, I'm going to trim off all that excess fabric on the bottom. Next, I'm going to notch into the piping flange. This will make it easier to turn it in. There's this little pleated gather at the back, and I can't have that. I need the top of the shirt to be completely flat in order for my additional piece to lay nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch pick the top stitching that's holding that pleat on, and then I'm going to pull that excess fabric towards the inside of the shirt, and I'm going to make it the top of a dart. I'm not going to worry about the rest of the fitting right now. I'm just going to bring that dart down a little bit, and then when I do the rest of my fitting later on, I'll just smooth it out into the rest of the shirt and it'll be fine. I'm just going to go back and top stitch now that space where I ripped the stitches out. All right, now that's nice and flat. I've pressed it out. So I'm going to put my embroidered back piece over top, and this way I can start to mark where the seams are on the shirt, and this will help me sort of landmark where everything needs to be. Right here, I'm just using my fingers to feel out where that seam is. Now here's the front panel. I'm going to do the same thing with this. So I'm just going to place my embroidered piece on top of the shirt, and you can see I'm lining my ruler up with where the seam was. I don't know why I didn't do this on the back. I just didn't think of it. So I'm making my line, and there you go. That's where my seam is going to be. Before I line those lines up though, I'm going to mark my seam allowance so that I can trim off the excess fabric. This will just make it easier to put my pieces together, because then I can just line up the raw edges. Oh look, I grew another little hand. That's my daughter saying, and what's this? And what's this? And what's this? All right, so here I have all 3 panels. They've all been trimmed, they've all been marked, and now they're all pinned together and ready to go. And now I've stitched them and I've pressed them. And now I'm going to top stitch either side. So now it's finally time to actually put these on the shirt. It's so exciting. Now I'm just placing that, making sure that I match up those seams one more time. And I'm going to pin on the seams, and I'm going to pin kind of all over. You really want to make sure that you're laying everything super flat and you're pinning just everywhere, because if you have something that is like one layer of fabric that's a little bit tight to the other, then you could get puckering or weird pulling, or you really need it to be completely flat. So once I get my pins in here, I'm going to go over the overlapped seams. So the yoke seam on the shirt that is covered by the yoke seam that I'm putting on, and I'm going to use a top stitch to just secure those together. All right, now I have that stitched on, and I also went ahead and I basted around the neckline. So I'm trimming the excess away, but I'm still leaving just a little bit right now because I'm going to try it on, which I need the excess from the neck gone so that I can actually try it on properly. But if anything's wrong and I need to adjust anything, I want like that little bit of wiggle room, so that's why I left a little bit extra. And it fit great, so at this point I can go ahead and I'm going to stitch in the ditch right next to my piping all along my edges. And I'm going to try and keep it as invisible as I can. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add piping to the button flange. So I've gone ahead and I've picked all the stitching from the sides of the button placket, but the button placket still stays there because the button holes are going to hold it in place, which is great. So there's no guesswork of, oh, am I messing up where my button holes are going to be? They're still there. You just can sort of free up the edges, slide your flange for your piping underneath, and then go back and top stitch it again. All right, once the button flange is done, I need to put the sleeves back on. So I have the excess fabric from my top piece that I'm going to cut off, which apparently I didn't feel like keeping in frame. Now I'm going to fold out my sleeve so that I have right sides together, and I'm going to put it inside the shirt, and I will pin all the way around the sleeve, and then I will stitch that on. Okay, now we're gonna reattach the collar. Now this seems like, oh my gosh, this isn't gonna work because one's way shorter than the other, but I mean, they came together, so you have to know that it fits. Now I'm going to fold each piece so that I can find the center, and I'm going to attach this in 2 parts. So if you've never done a collar before, it's not that big of a deal. So I've matched up my centers, and I am first attaching the inside layer of fabric. The collar does have 2 layers, an inner and an outer. So that outer side I'm just folding out to make sure that I don't accidentally pin it. And the trick to getting the larger shirt to fit on the smaller collar edge is to make sure that once you have anchored your center and your outer edge, that you round that edge as the way the collar is going to lie when it's on your body, right? It's going to go around your neck. It's not going to be in a straight line. And creating that circumference is why it works, that the collar seems to be a little bit shorter than the opening in the shirt, but it's actually not, because once you round the edge, it matches up perfectly. So I'm just gonna go through and I'm gonna pin all of that. You can see there's a bias tape edging there on the inside. I'm gonna go and pin that all on the inside, and then I'm going to give 2 rows of stitching to secure it, and then we'll come back and look at the other side. All right, so the inside is secured, and you can see my 2 rows of stitching, and the reason we do the inside first is because then we get to cover up that ugly stitching. Now I'm going to fold the top layer of the collar over to cover that stitching, and again I'm starting in the center and I'm going to work my way out. This layer only needs to be secured with 1 row of top stitching because you've really secured the collar already with the 2 rows of stitching that you used from the underside. Okay, so this is the point where things started to fall apart a little bit for me. I took a couple of days off from making this shirt because I had the stomach flu, so that was no fun. And then on the 3rd day, I was still in a flu fog, but I was like, oh my god, I gotta get this thing done. And I also had not yet had a chance to get anybody to help me pin the sides and stuff where I needed to take the shirt in. So my mom was home, so I was like, awesome, I can take the shirt down to my mom's, she can do the pinning for me, so I have to work on this today because I can't do anything else without fitting the rest of the shirt. Ideally, I would have done it earlier, right? But I couldn't. I put the shirt on inside out, she starts pinning. I'm standing there and I'm looking at what she's doing, and I notice buttons on the cuff. No buttons? Buttons. I put one of the sleeves on inside out. No problem. I will take the markings from the side that's right. I will just take the pins out of the side that's wrong, and then I can transfer the markings after I fix the sleeve. So I grab my stitch picker, I pick away the stitches, I turn the sleeve, I put it back in, I put it on, I try the shirt on again, just before I go and actually start cutting away the stuff that my mom had pinned for me. And somewhere between the flat felled seams and the fact that there's not really a right side and a wrong side to the fabric and the flu fog, I switched the wrong sleeve. Now they're both wrong. On a side note, if you've never checked out Kylie and the Machine, they make amazing labels for you to sew into your handmade wardrobe, and one of them says made with love and swear words. I'm gonna have to get a pack just so I can sew one into this shirt. Actually, I'll probably go through them pretty quick. All right, so off camera, I went and took in the darts that my mom helped pin on me, and now I'm going to make a pattern for my cuff. I've placed my cuff a 1/4 inch from the bottom of the paper, which is going to give me my seam allowance for the bottom. Now I'm just tracing the shape of the cuff. The thing I really want the most is that rounded edge, and I'm just really concerned about the rounded edge on one side. Now I'm using my tracing wheel just to help me mark on the paper the 1/4 inch all the way around that for my seam allowance. If you don't have one of these doodads, no big deal. Just take 2 pencils, tape them together, and trace that outer line, and that'll give you your 1/4 inch. Now I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to measure the halfway mark, the halfway length of my cuff, and then I'm going to fold it in half, and that way I will get my full length, and I can just trim the other edge to match. Oh, there's that little hand again. And I'm going to trim the other edge to match the rounded top of the cuff. Now, at this point, my camera strap has fallen and I didn't realize it, so there's a little while where there's that shadow in the corner. I apologize, I realized it eventually, but there you go. All right, so now I've got my cuff pattern, and I'm going to cut 4 pieces of fabric and 2 pieces of interfacing. On 2 of those pieces, I am going to attach some of the piping that we've made. To the other sides, I'm going to attach the iron-on interfacing. Once those are secured on, I'm going to fold a 1/4 inch from the bottom edge of the cuff, and I'm going to press that. Once I have both sides of the cuffs ready to go, I'm going to layer the one with the piped edge with the one with the interfacing edge. And I'm going to stitch all around the outer edge a 1/4 inch seam allowance. But I'm going to be leaving the straight edge open. Now I've got those stitched together. I need to go around the rounded edges and just notch into them, being very careful not to actually cut over the stitch line. Once I have those notched, I can go ahead and turn them out. And here are our completed cuffs. And I've gone ahead and put the buttonholes in as well. Just for time's sake, I didn't put that in the video. But one thing I do want to show you is my favorite way to open up a buttonhole. I take a pin and I put it across the buttonhole just before the outer stitching, and then I take my seam ripper, push it into the buttonhole, and then I just slide it up and the pin stops it before you go through the end stitches, so you never accidentally rip through your buttonhole. Alright, now it's time to attach the cuff to the end of the sleeve. Now I've got a couple of pins in there because there's just those little pleats that are in the bottom of the sleeve. Now I'm just going to take that flange from the piping, and sort of the way we did the collar, sort of one side and inner and an outer at a time, I'm going to first attach the side with the piping to the right side of the sleeve. And once again, I'm going to go back to using my zipper foot to stitch that out. Now that that is stitched, I can go ahead and tuck the raw edge of the sleeve into the completed cuff. And I'm just sort of tucking in those corners really nice and pinning them. And then I just need to top stitch above that piping, and that seam will catch the folded under cuff, and the cuff will be done. Alright, so now that we have the old cuffs kind of hanging around, it's actually really helpful because we're going to harvest one side of the fabric. So one side of the cuff, just like the ones that we made, has interfacing and one side does not. I'm harvesting from the side that does not have interfacing. And this is going to be the shirt side of the pocket bag when we do the piped welt pockets. Now, I'm not going to put a full pocket. I know, it's a travesty to like deny yourself pockets, but the placement of these pockets is such that it would just be so unflattering to actually have anything in the pocket that there's just no point. But I would like the facing, the inside facing of the pocket to be the darker fabric. So what I need to make sure is that I have the lighter fabric on the shirt side of the pocket to help camouflage that dark color. If I wasn't going to do that and I wasn't going to make a real pocket, I could just sort of skip that step and just do the other side of the facing for the pocket. But I thought this way, if I did the whole process, then if you actually wanted to make yours a pocket, you could at least see what the whole process was going to be. So you see here that I've made a little template, and I'm just sort of made it so that it goes around the piping that's already there, but I'm just double checking with a ruler that my pocket is going to start sort of at a particular point so that I can measure it off the other side as well. Then I'm just taking my chalk pencil and I'm going to trace out the shape of my pocket. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line my piping up right with the very corner of the pocket. And I'm just going to lay my piping along the line that I've made, pinning it as I go. Before I stitch that out though, remember the pieces that we harvested? We're going to pin those to the underside of where that pocket is going to be, so that when we stitch the piping on, those stitches are also going to catch that piece of fabric. Alright, there we go. So it's all stitched on, and that piece of old cuff is attached behind that. And now I'm going to go ahead and put the other piece of piping on. So the first thing I need to do before I can get that on though is I need to fold up the flange from the first piece of piping that I've sewn on. Because you don't want those to overlap at all. They need to be able to fold in once you open up your pocket. So be really careful about not over stitching those two flanges. They really need to stay separated. Okay, now for the nerve-wracking part. Are you ready for this? You're gonna grab your seam ripper and you are just gonna punch right through that fabric because there is no turning back now. Now I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm going to follow that line. Again, I'm going to be careful to open up those piping flanges because I don't want to accidentally cut them. We really need to have that fabric as part of the structure of the pocket. So just be careful that you're not nicking those or trimming them down or anything. Alright, now we need to fold that flange in. This is why it was so important not to stitch those flanges together or to have them trimmed or anything, because we need to fold them to the inside now. Don't be too worried if your cut is not exact, or if you have to do sort of a Y cut in the point of the pocket. You're actually going to be covering those points up with a little bit of decorative stitching. So as I pinned that bottom piece, I realized it wasn't laying nicely because I didn't go and do any release cuts on the piping flange for the bottom piece. So I'm just going to go back quickly, I'll pull the pins out of here, and then I will flip this over and just cut the flange on that bottom piece of piping. And there we go. You can see immediately that the tension has been released and that pocket is going to lay down perfectly now. There we go. Now I'm just going to top stitch all the way around that. And here you can see the inside view after it's been top stitched. Now I need to put the inside of the pocket bag on. And I'm going to secure both sides of the pocket bag together. I'm not pinning through to the shirt, so it's just the burgundy piece plus that pink piece that we cut off of the cuff. That's all that I'm pinning together. So even though I'm not putting an entire pocket, I hope that it's clear here how the pocket structure works. So if you wanted to put a full pocket, it's really easy to do so. Now I'm going to go and stitch all the way around the pocket bag, and I just slid my shirt out of the way, and I'll just keep doing that as I go all the way around. Alright, and here you can see I have it all stitched out all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and trim that and finish the edges off camera. Now, there's just a couple things left to do. I need to do the decorative stitching in the corners of the pocket. So I have just made myself a little template of a triangle, and I'm gonna just place that where I think it looks cute and trace it with a pencil. And I'm going to use the herringbone stitch that we talked about last week that I used on the leaves of the embroidery patches. So if you want to know how I'm going to do that, you can go back and watch the video from last week. I'll link it in the show notes, but I'm not going to show that on camera here because I've already showed it once. Now the last thing we need to address is the button color, because those sort of off-white dingy yellow ones that came on the shirt are not doing it for me. Again, I'm going to do that off camera as well. This tutorial has been a bit of a beast and I respect your time, so let's check it out. I am so happy with how this turned out. I mean, it's basically a novelty shirt that I'm not gonna wear that often, but you know, it's just kind of cool when you put in the effort and see what you can come up with. And there's a lot of techniques here that I had never used before. They were new to me. And yeah, I couldn't be more happy with how it turned out. And needlecraft, I love doing needlecrafts. I'm so happy with it. Here we go, the big reveal. I am ready for Stampede. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you had fun with this one like I did. Make sure you do all the things, like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you haven't done it already, and I will see you next week.